Hello and welcome to another episode of Triple Tap. This is episode number 18. I can't believe it. I'm so excited about tonight. Kent, Lance, how are you this week?
Go, Lancey.
Oh, I'm going to jump in first for a change.
Yeah.
Look, awesome week. Massive news for me. I'm doing cartwheels inside. You just can't see it. So what's the big news? It's just happened. Everyone's going to think I'm talking about London. I'm not. I'm talking about Russia. Vladimir Putin has pulled out of the Antarctic Agreement and he's planning an expedition to go down there. Now, what's he going down there for? That, for me, is the exciting event that's happening this week. That's the big picture story, guys.
That's pretty cool.
What about
That's really cool. Oh, look, I had a fairly at home sort of week. I screwed off a lot of iron on the roof of my house that I'm building this week. So I was fairly self-absorbed. So time to get back into it. So I'm really excited about tonight's guest, though. So this is going to be fantastic.
Yeah, I'm really excited about tonight. And, you know, I nearly didn't think it was going to happen because the power went out about an hour ago. And I'm like, oh, no, we've had a blackout. And I'm running around checking the meter box and everything. It turns out I've just overloaded all the cables here, having too much fun. So I managed to get it all up and running. So I'm really pleased about that because I did not want to miss tonight's episode. So we will jump straight into it, guys, because we've got a lot of questions to ask our guest for this evening. I'll just go ahead and just tell you a little bit about him. His name is Alek Svetski. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. He is the author of the best-selling book, Uncommunist Manifesto. We're going to hear a little bit about that tonight. He's a podcaster, a Bitcoiner entrepreneur, and a contrarian. And after 13 years in the startup scene, Alex now spends the bulk of his time researching the ways in which Bitcoin will impact the world sociologically, economically, politically, and culturally, and transforming that into content that can be consumed by his books, podcasts, essays, and of course, articles. We'll share his website a little bit later on as we talk to him. The most influential book in history got it all wrong. And it's time to fix the book and change the world. And that's exactly what Alex has done with his book, The Communist Manifesto. The book is out now live. We'll pop the link up before tonight's podcast. But ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, we would love to welcome Alek Svetski to the call. Are you there, Alex? If you are, pop your video on and let's get cracking. How are you?
There he is.
I have appeared. How are we doing?
Appeared. Awesome. Alex, I want to know one thing. How long have you been involved? I was going to say cryptocurrency, but given what you said before, that you're a real Bitcoiner, not so much crypto. We will talk about that tonight, I'm sure. But how long have you been involved with Bitcoin and how did you get started?
It was around 2015 where I started dabbling, and it was 2016 where I got a little bit more serious, and 2017 where I would say I kind of found nirvana and fell down the rabbit hole, really. But I think for a lot of people my age, so I'm kind of, you know, right in that cusp. I'm a late 80s baby, so I grew up without a cell phone, and then kind of grew into modern cell phones. We kind of messed around on the internet, you know, we played around with Napster, we did all that kind of crap. And I'd heard about, it was funny, I'd heard about Bitcoin in probably 2011, 2012. I think it was from Max Kaiser just jumping up and down on a couch, yelling at people to buy Bitcoin at $1 or something. And I was a total gold silver bug back then. So I'd lost everything in 2008, trying to gamble on the stock market because I thought I was a genius. I was just a moron kid out of university, and I put all my scholarship money on the markets. I, you know, made a small fortune by the time I was 19 and a half, and then I lost everything by the time I was 20, and I ended up in, you know, a ridiculous amount of debt. So it's kind of what sent me down the gold and silver rabbit hole, and I became a whole gold bug. Didn't trust fiat money, and yeah, I first heard about Bitcoin, but dismissed it. I thought, this is stupid internet funny money. And I never saw it again. My entrepreneurial life kind of took me in different directions. I built some software companies, this and that. I was in hospitality, etc. And then, yeah, it wasn't until 2015 again. It was actually this junkie friend of mine who was, you know, doing all sorts of weird stuff. He's like, bro, have you heard about this thing called Bitcoin? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, bro, my friend made so much money out of it. He started jabbering on. I was like, that thing's still around. And I checked out the price and it was like, you know, $600 or whatever. And I just sort of, the difference from when I'd first saw it to then, I was like, fucking hell, I worked my ass off for the last 5 years, like businesses, this, that. I could have just like bought a little Bitcoin and just fucking gone on a holiday. So that was kind of the impetus for me to start digging. And then I've got a little saying, which is I came for the money. So I came to like get rich. I thought this was a way to get rich. But as I dug in, I found something so much, far more meaningful and important. So I kind of say I stayed for the money. And when I say the money, it's what I believe is the most important social technology that exists for human beings. It's existed from the beginning of time. It'll exist until the end of time, because we need to we need to find a way to intersubjectively value time, matter, and energy, and technologies. Money is the technology that solves that problem. So yeah, as I've gone down that rabbit hole, here I am now. People call me a Bitcoin maximalist, but that's too soft. I'm like a Bitcoin fucking ultra supremacist. So nothing else comes close. So here we are.
Okay. So maybe explain to us the difference between the creation of Bitcoin and the team that put that together, and the evolution of some of these other coins that all the truthers are out there promoting.
I guess where we should start is like, what is the problem that Bitcoin is solving? So let me ask you guys, like, how would you interpret the answer to that question? What do you think the problem that Bitcoin is solving is?
I don't know enough about it.
Well, for me, Bitcoin puts the common person who's purchased Bitcoin back in control of finances of a value that's out from under control of the government. Plus, it helps you trade internationally, but it puts you back in control. It's a currency that's not backed by some phony government. And believe you me, here in Australia, as I'm sure you're well aware, we know a lot about phony government, because our whole country's run by phony government. They're not even lawful. And so the money that they produce is just another way for them to control us.
Okay. You're directionally right.
Am I sort of getting a bit of it right, Alex?
Directionally right. And can I say this, with utmost respect, is that a lot of people will say something similar because that's sort of what they've heard.
Yeah.
But what I'll try and do now is I'll try and kind of express or explain sort of the underlying premise of, what the purpose of something like this is. And what I'll start with is basically why we need money, civilizationally speaking. And first and foremost, as I just said earlier, money is the technology that human beings had to discover. A social species like human beings must discover a technology like money in order to trade the product of our labor amongst one another, because we all perform different actions and functions in a civilization, in a society, and we all have subjective needs and wants. I mean, Lance likes wearing collared shirts. I don't. So as a result, we value things differently. I might value water, because that's all I drink. Kent might value a coffee. Every single one of us is different, and every single one of us performs a unique function in a society, in a civilization, in a group. So what we've done since the beginning of time as human beings is we've looked at ways to solve that intersubjective problem. And we've done it with, what I kind of call the language of value. That's effectively what money is. We've used everything from promises to inscriptions on a cave wall. Like, you went out and, hunted for some berries. I brought the food in, you cleaned the cave, and we kind of figure out a way to ensure that work is being done and traded amongst each other. This is the core of division of labor. We realized that we needed to expand from that. So we found objects. The first widely used monies were things that were scarce and rare in the immediate environment. This is why shells were such a popular money. There's a brilliant article written by this polymath called Nick Szabo, who's one of the people who may be candidates for Satoshi Nakamoto, but if not, be him. He was someone who definitely inspired Satoshi Nakamoto, who's the anonymous founder of Bitcoin. But Nick Szabo wrote an article called Shelling Out in the 90s. Absolutely fucking brilliant history on the anthropological emergence of money and what it did for civilization. And basically civilization, you can track the growth and fall of civilization with the growth and fall of functional money. Always. I don't care if it's Rome, if it's, Macedonia, if it's the Lydian Empire, if it's the Florentines, if it's the English, the Americans, anyone, everywhere. Like, so long as the product of one's labor can be measured and traded as accurately as possible, civilization can kind of build on itself. When that signal gets distorted, civilization starts crumbling. So coming back to money, so we had shells. We kind of evolved into, at some point, different people using salt and this and that. The word salary comes from salt. Salt was a form of money. But as we kind of evolved, we all individually, all throughout the world, converged on metals, because metals had better attributes. One of the core attributes of money is like durability. You need portability, you need recognizability, you need fungibility, you need something scarce. So the problem with salt, for example, is that imagine if you worked all your life, you had all your savings in salt, and then it rained and you lost all your wealth.
Yep.
It doesn't make very good money, right? So you need all these attributes. And the more attributes that an object or a good has, the more likely it is to become the money in the ecosystem or in the civilization that you're in. And lo and behold, we all converged onto gold and silver primarily, but gold primarily as the prime monetary metal because it has the best attributes. It wasn't because somebody just chose gold by fiat, by decree, right? Fiat decree means by the demand of somebody. Gold emerged and it was monetized over portable. It is very recognizable. It is, relatively divisible. It is fungible. Gold is gold is gold everywhere. It's an inert metal. It's the only inert metal that we have on the planet that you can find at room temperature. It's incredible. So mind you, if there was alien species out there, they would also converge onto gold because gold is a universal metal. I'm going to just mute this for a second because of the sirens. Actually, sorry. I think they passed. So we've got this gold thing. Now, what we ended up doing as human beings is that every time we've sort of been on a gold standard, gold is a good way, it's a good proxy to measure humans' time, energy, and resources, right? Like it's a good way to do it because you can't just conjure gold up out of thin air. You either have to beat someone over the head to steal it, which is one way of acquiring wealth, but you can't print it. So we at some point came up with an idea was as society got richer and richer and richer, the same amount of gold bought more goods and services, right? So it became less efficient. So this is where we introduced secondary monetary metals, things like silver, copper, etc., which they were kind of the small change. But carrying around bearer instruments can be difficult, particularly for large sums of money. You don't want to carry around a caravan of gold. So what we would do is we would store it with goldsmiths, and they would issue us a little certificate that would say, this is how much gold, and that bearer instrument, that certificate was redeemable for that much gold. Then the bright idea came about of, well, you know what? Not everyone is redeeming these certificates. The certificates are moving around. Let's just issue more certificates than there is gold. So what that does is it creates fake wealth in the system. It creates the illusion of more money, but the productivity, the gross product of the system hasn't increased. So this is where the genesis of something like inflation is. Now, we've had inflation in multiple ways. Like the old emperors of Rome, what did they do? They destroyed their currency by, instead of keeping the gold coins pure, they started jamming copper into them. And what happened was there was more money for the same amount of goods and services, which means the prices of things went up, and those who weren't holding assets were impoverished. We're seeing the same fucking story over and over and over again. We haven't learned from anything. So we keep going through this cycle. The issue that we have in modern civilization is that money is 100% completely fiat now. So even the gold promissory notes that they were issuing, they at least had some gold backing, right? Now, it's literally nothing. In 71, Nixon took the last great country off the gold standard and made money completely something that is of decree by a moron central bank, by a set of, bureaucrats, which means now you and I have to trade the product of our labor for money. They press a button and conjure it up out of thin air. So think about this. You're playing a game of Monopoly, and one of the players on the board can do whatever they want, and they just pull money out of the till.
Yep.
You cannot beat that enemy. Like, you cannot beat that opponent. It's impossible. They win no matter what. It is a completely fucking rigged game. So then what happens is, and this is where I'm kind of getting into modern civilization, is that all of the people that surround that institution, that surround the central bank and the government, begin to reorient their behavior to partnering with politics and central banking instead of competing on the free market. It distorts everything downstream. So when people sit there and complain about like the Facebooks and the Amazons and all of that sort of stuff of the world who are, censoring people and doing all this sort of stuff, well, of course they're going to do it. Who's their customer? It's not you and me. It's the government. It's the central bank. They are beneficiaries of the monetary spigot. The closer you are to Wall Street, the closer you are to where the money printing occurs, the more of a beneficiary you are, because the money comes through Wall Street to you first. Your stock price grows and then it flows to everybody else. But by the time it flows to everyone else, the total money in the system has increased to the point where inflation has caught up, asset prices have gone up, but everything else hasn't. So then it starts to create this major disparity. So coming back to Bitcoin, and this is a really long answer to your question, but I think it's important to sort of give people the framing, the context, is that Bitcoin was designed to solve that fucking problem. Money is a fixed quantity. None of us can print time. None of us can create energy out of thin air. And none of us can just magically make resources appear out of thin air. There's an amount on the planet. So money is supposed to measure all of those things. And it's supposed to measure it's supposed to give us a way to measure the intersubjective value between the individuals using those things. So Bitcoin solved that problem by issuing a constitution, basically. So if you want to think about what Bitcoin is, think of it like a digital constitution. Like, think of the American Constitution and the amendments. Bitcoin is also a constitution with a set of rules in code. And that code is effectively just a program. And it's got, a couple of rules: 21 million Bitcoin, a block every 10 minutes, which aggregates a series of transactions that are propagated amongst a bunch of nodes. It uses SHA-256 as the mining algorithm. It's got public-private key cryptography. So it's got a series of lists, a series of rules. And every single node, every single computer that runs a copy of that Bitcoin code is in sync every 10 minutes. So think of it like this global clock. And this constitution this is very key, it can be changed by anyone. You and I can go and change the constitution of Bitcoin tomorrow. But the beauty of Bitcoin, and this is one of the mind-blowing parts, its security is in its openness, not in its closedness. I can go and change Bitcoin tomorrow. I literally run the Bitcoin program on my computer. I change it. I am no longer in sync with the rest of the network. I've booted myself off, and now I'm running Bitcoin Alex's version. And I am in consensus with fucking nobody, or the couple morons who decide to follow me and be on my version of Bitcoin. The core Bitcoin network just keeps chugging along. Nothing changes, because that is where all the consensus, that's where all the nodes are. And it just does its thing. And it keeps growing. Every single person who kind of joins adds on and becomes a part of a larger and larger network that is running the exact same rules that have been there from the day one of Bitcoin. It's this social consensus, which has never existed at this scale before, because all the economic incentives, the energy incentives, everything kind of lines up. And the way it was issued to the world was incredible. It was an anonymous person who had planned this at least for a decade or two beforehand, issued it, produced it in the world, got it bootstrapped, and fucking disappeared. So there's no head of the snake to cut off. So to tie this now back to your original question, then I'll shut up for a bit, is Bitcoin versus crypto. Bitcoin is this perfect money that was introduced into the world and picked up by people, by the market, in the same way as gold was 5,000 years ago. Imagine the first people who found gold on the floor. They're like, what the hell is this yellow shiny rock? What am I going to do with it? While everyone was still using seashells and glass beads and cows for money. Bitcoin was monetized from nothing. The first Bitcoin transaction was 10,000 pizzas. Sorry, 2 pizzas for 10,000 Bitcoin. So it valued one Bitcoin at 0.0001 cent, right? Here it is today, 20,000. So it emerged organically, not by decree of somebody. It doesn't have some leader or ruler that suggests how much Bitcoin there should be. It's encoded, and every copy of Bitcoin is the same. And there is no organization or administrative structure or anything like that that can change that. And even if there was, like there was an attempt in 2017 by all the corporates, the big exchanges and the regulators in 2017 to regulate Bitcoin. All they did was they forked themselves off onto a duplicate copy, and that duplicate copy was fucking worthless because no other Bitcoiner ever moved over to it. We all stayed on Bitcoin. So they made themselves redundant. They spent hundreds of millions of dollars trying to attack, made themselves redundant. So it's this beautiful thing that operates. Versus crypto, every single fucking crypto project is a function of one of 3 things: an idiot who's naive, some moron who's just realized that they can just scam people out of money by printing money on the digital realm. So what they've realized is that, hey, if the government can print money, why shouldn't I be able to print money? So they do it themselves and they scam. Or people who are, how can I say, like, I guess they fit in one of the first 2 categories, but they're conceited enough, like they tried to change Bitcoin. This is like the founder of Ethereum, Vitalik Buterin. People think he's like some super coder. He's a fucking moron. He originally made a bunch of proposals to change Bitcoin so that it could do more things, and everyone laughed at him. So he went and created his own coin so that he could do exactly that. So that he could literally be Jay Powell, or whatever Federal Reserve. Like he wanted to be Christine Lagarde, Jay Powell, and everybody mixed into one. Like he is literally the overlord of this, and there's people out there running around giving him money so that he could be their new boss. Like he's literally more powerful than Klaus Schwab, and this is what people are running to because they're stupid, because they don't understand that Bitcoin is this emergent money, that there is no capacity or ability or opportunity or anything for anybody to run the money. So it's taken the money, the most important technology, and put it on the top shelf above all of our reach. So now we can all play a fair game in civilization. Now, if you're a better carpenter than me, Lance, you build a house, you get the money, you get paid for it. If I'm a better musician, I get paid for it. Now it's a fair game. And yes, we'll have disparity in civilization, but it's fair. It's not fucking equal. Whereas all of these money management versions of money, whether it's crypto, whether it's fiat, they all sit in the same bucket, which is we'll play with the money to bring equality to everybody. And you end up with a ruler. So anyway, I'll shut up for now.
No, please don't. But I'm just curious, but hang on, before we go on, what country are you in at the moment?
He can't say.
Okay.
Yeah, there's lots of sirens here, man. It's in
I
the
hear
capital
police
city.
sirens,
It's
and
ridiculous.
I think what country is it? Yeah, go ahead, Leeds. Yep.
Yeah. So when you're looking at it, is there a special thing about Bitcoin that means it couldn't be duplicated or copied? Say we want to start a banking system in Australia, move to an electronic currency, digital currency. Is there anything stopping us from creating something equally as good as Bitcoin?
Yeah,
because we've got time, resources, and energy.
I'd say there's many things. Number one is Bitcoin was planted in 2008 before anyone expected something like this to ever occur, right? Bitcoin solves the problem of, so the biggest problem with digital money, and the biggest problem with any digital good, is what's called the double spend problem, is that how can you prove, or how can you ascertain, or how can you be sure that the digital good that you had, when it's passed from me to you, is actually passed from me to you, and it's not just a copy. So everything on the internet, everything digital is actually a copy. So every email is a copy, every file is a copy, everything is a copy. There's never been a bearer instrument on the internet. And Bitcoin solved that problem by bringing together this concept of proof of work, which is the transformation of electricity directly into a monetary unit. There's nothing more efficient on the planet. It solved it through the combination of that, through this architecture that people know as the blockchain, through public-private key cryptography, through all of these things. But it was planted at a time when there was no resistance to something like this. We'll never get that opportunity again. There's no way to go back to 2008. Doing anything like this now is 100% going to be shut down early. 100%. There's absolutely no chance. Bitcoin had to monetize. And the most important thing about any new form of money is that it has to start from zero. And starting from zero means the economic network is weak. That is when it's most susceptible to being shut down. Bitcoin was most susceptible to being shut down in the first 5 years when it was laughed at and ridiculed and everyone was told that they were morons. And this is the one opportunity. This is why I think it's almost like, I mean, for me, it's the most important thing that's happened, I don't know, since we figured out the printing press, or, you know, maybe even earlier than that. Like it is monumentally important because it's a once in a civilization event that money can emerge in the technological age, which functions like a bearer instrument. So it functions like me giving you a piece of gold because of the cryptographic guarantees. And it does that not because some authority is running it. And whether the authority is good or bad doesn't matter. Like, it's just Bitcoin does that through math. There's no higher authority than mathematics. That's the language of God, the language of the universe. So it's achieved that through mathematics and through energy, through the use of energy, which are two things that just can't be messed with. And now we have this ledger, because Bitcoin's kind of runs in two ways. Like Bitcoin, you've got the Bitcoin, the unit, and Bitcoin, the network. And Bitcoin, the network, is like a ledger. And that's effectively, if you think about what money is in a metaphysical sense, if you kind of like zoom out and think about what money is on a global sense, it's really just the scoreboard of all of humanity's action. Like, you know, like if you want to take the religious approach, God's given us this planet with all these resources and energy, and then he's put us all on it. And he said, now play and produce and do stuff with it. And each of your scores will adjust based on who is competent, who's doing the right thing, et cetera, right? So this is, and that's what Bitcoin solves perfectly. So to answer your question, like, can it be done again? I don't think anything like this can ever be done again. That pure genesis, that perfect, immaculate conception, to say, happened once. And the way it went into civilization, the way it spread, just can't be replicated again. And this is something that crypto people just, you know, seem to not understand. They want to do it like Vitalik wants to be the person who's at the head of that, for example, or Charles Hoskinson, or replace the shitcoiner, basically. So even people with good intentions, for example, you would like to do it again. You would have to do every single thing that Satoshi did. You'd have to become anonymous because you 100% get killed. Or you'd get co-opted. Like Ethereum, for example, is the Ethereum Foundation. Half of them are World Economic Forum fellows. Like the only way that they can subsist to build a competing currency with the government is for them to partner with them. It's not going to happen otherwise. So for you not to be co-opted, or for you not to be killed, for you not to be taken over, you have to be anonymous. You have to introduce it in a way that no one's going to know that it's you and tie it back to you. You have to do it in a way that is credible enough for people to trust it when it's worth nothing, and to trade their time and energy and products and goods and services from that. Like, that happened. It's gone. That train has sailed. So what we need to do, it's like the onus is on us now as individuals to not try and compete with Bitcoin, is to say, we have this perfect money now. Now let's align around it. And it's the one thing that the government won't be able to shut down. So you and I can trade amongst each other. We can be humans, free human beings, because with free money, you can actually be a free human being. Without it, you can't. And we can start to build parallel systems outside of their control. So it's that keystone. It's not, I say this to everyone, it's like, you know, I'm so bullish on Bitcoin that people think, oh, it's the one solution that solves everything. It's not. You need a bridge to go from A to B. And in that bridge requires a keystone, so that the stone that sits in the middle that holds the arch together, that's Bitcoin. So without that, the bridge falls. But you also need the other parts. You need parallel energy, you need parallel thinking, politics, organization, you need parallel food, you need parallel healthcare, you need all the other stuff. But the keystone for that is a money that cannot be co-opted, cannot be changed, cannot be inflated, cannot be run by someone, it cannot be shut down. And
in that way, countries can trade fairly with each other. People can trade fairly with each other right across the planet.
Totally. All that friction that exists today, like I'm traveling at the moment, the amount of friction that I have just so I can do a goddamn transaction, it's ridiculous. So, but I would argue that that's one of the lower problems, because that is a technologically solvable problem. But when the whole world is on a Bitcoin standard, to come back to your point, fair, which is very specific, is that anyone anywhere can value their labor or their products or their services whatever they want to, as opposed to being hampered by taxes or whatever protectionist racket that exists around them. So if I want to get someone from, for example, actually literally last night, I'm getting someone to help me out with my Twitter account from South Africa. And it's simple. We don't have to do anything. We just had a conversation. He sent me a Bitcoin address. I dropped him some Bitcoin. He's taking care of my Twitter account. Didn't ask for permission. Didn't have to fill out no forms. Didn't have to open a bank account. Didn't have to do any of that. It took 30 seconds. That's it. It's just, I love it because it's just fundamentally incompatible. So it's think of all of this infrastructure that's built in the legacy system, banks, central banks, judicial systems, government, police, all of it is involved to hold this thing together. And Bitcoin's just yeah, fuck you, I don't recognize any of it. We're just doing math here and we just did a transaction outside of your system. Completely doesn't recognize it. It's the ultimate fuck you, because imagine this asshole just telling you what to do, and it's you're completely deaf and oblivious to him. That's it. That's what Bitcoin does.
Is there enough? Hang on, no. Is there enough Bitcoin to go around for the whole world?
If there was one Bitcoin, it would be enough. What matters is that it's divisible, right? So what matters is the number is fixed. So as you divide through, what happens is each individual unit appreciates in purchasing power, but that's what you want. Think about it this way. So this is really important. People get hung up on this. They're like, oh, there's not enough Bitcoin. Yes, there is. One Bitcoin would be enough. So when you have a fixed supply of money, which maps to the fixed amount of time, energy, and resources we have on the planet, what happens is, as we innovate, the same unit of money buys more stuff. So think about when we make a better TV, what happens to the price of TVs? It goes down. When we make exactly. So that deflation is actually the normal thing. We've been brainwashed into thinking deflation is bad, when deflation is another word for innovation. When you innovate, the price of goods and services comes down. When you compete, the price of goods and services comes down. It is an abomination. It is retarded that we live in a world where 50 years ago, a Big Mac was 60 cents and now it's fucking $7. That means, economically, that we are less efficient and less capable of making a Big Mac. And that's bullshit. We are far more technologically advanced. What that means is that despite the technological advancements, we have fucked up the money so bad that the same burger costs 10 times as much. So the amount of Bitcoin will always be fixed. That's one of the innovations, and that's one of the perfections. And what should happen is the price of everything will come down. So your savings will go up. And now think about what that does to things like Wall Street and everything else downstream. The fact that people don't need to invest, have a super, ETFs, all that fucking garbage goes out the window, because for the first time in history, in modern history in particular, human beings, normal, average, everyday mums and dads can work, they can save, and their savings maintains, if not increases, purchasing power. That's a functional civilization.
Right, so I'm going to come back to my question now, if you don't mind, and that is, so we want to set up a new economy in Australia, new banking system, new everything. So say we need to underwrite that with $5 trillion worth of Bitcoin. How do we purchase that?
Yeah, well, my suggestion is start buying now. Basically, is that effectively, you look at Salvador as a great example. Is they're starting to put their national treasury onto a Bitcoin standard. So what they're doing is they're disconnecting themselves from the SWIFT standard and from all of that. That's effectively what you need to do. You need to take that wealth that exists in natural resources and everything that you have, and you need to be acquiring Bitcoin and holding that on the balance sheet as the primary money. And the thing about, like, you want to think about banking as well in a new way. So I founded a company in Australia called Amber. And the way I kind of envision what we're doing there is kind of like a bank of the future. And I'll give you an analogy with email, which might help you think about how banks might function in the future on a Bitcoin standard. Is when I send an email from me to you, from Gmail through to, let's say, a Hotmail account, it runs on an internet protocol, whether it's IMAP or SMTP or whatever, but it just, like, it's a packet of data of ones and zeros that just gets moved across a communication network, and it comes out the other side. It's decrypted, downloaded, etc. Now, Gmail and Hotmail are not sending the email. They're just the client that provides a service which then communicates on the channel that runs underneath. Okay. So now think about Bitcoin as the underlying protocol, the underlying channel. It moves packets of data, but those packets of data are not just information, it's actually money. So Bitcoin handles all of that. And there's what's called the Lightning Network, which enables you to do that in an abstracted fashion on Bitcoin, but to move more fractions, smaller amounts of Bitcoin faster, cheaper, and easier. So they're protocols. They're the communication medium. I believe the banks of the future are going to be application level products, very similar to Gmail, Hotmail, GoDaddy Mail, whatever other fucking mail, right? That will enable you to interact with Bitcoin better, smoother, faster, easier, right? So it will be a game of user experience. It'll be a game of features. It'll be a game of service. It'll be a game, like you'll have, instead of a couple large banks, you'll have multiple competing apps that run off Bitcoin, because the banks will no longer be able to toy with the money, print the money, do fractional reserve, none of that stuff. It's all gone because Bitcoin takes care of that at the protocol level. Banking will become an application, it'll become a service. That changes banking forever. So I just want to plant that seed, because this is going to take time. Like we're at $20,000 Bitcoin. I mean, Bitcoin as a monetary network is going to suck up all of gold's monetary premium. It's going to suck up all the excess monetary premium in stocks and real estate and everything over the coming decade or two. So like one Bitcoin will be, I don't know, by the time I'm, what are we, 2022, by the end of this decade, my guess, like conservatively speaking, is one Bitcoin will have the purchasing power of 10 million US dollars. By the end of 2040, probably 100 or 200 or $1 billion US dollars. So it's going to keep appreciating. So it's going to take time for us to get to this banking as an application. So what to do in the intervening time, I think, is think about that. Think about how to build a digital banking product that is a feature that leverages the Bitcoin network. That's how to skate where the puck is going. And have Bitcoin on your balance sheet.
That's a good piece of advice, and very timely for us. So that's quite amazing. And countries need to get behind this. I mean, El Salvador's done it. Is it true? I believe Russia's done it also now. I
don't know if Russia's done it. I think see Putin has a whole bunch of resources. I would almost guarantee Russia's got Bitcoin on the balance sheet, like 100%. It's just non-disclosed, right? They're not going to go around and tell everyone that they've got Bitcoin on the balance sheet, because as soon as they do, what do you think is going to happen to the price of Bitcoin?
Yeah, straight up.
It's going to make it a hell of a lot more expensive for them. So even for you guys, like, I mean, the ideal, and this is, I believe this is happening all over the place, is you've got governments that may or may not be friendly, but for their own self-preservation, are putting Bitcoin on the balance sheet quietly while they can, because it is against their own self-interest to tell everybody that they're buying Bitcoin, because it, one, delegitimizes their own currency, but number two, legitimizes Bitcoin and will send the price to the fucking moon tomorrow. Like there's one thing that also, is very important about the fixed supply thing, is there's stuff, everything in basically nature that we have is has an elastic supply. And then there's one thing that has an inelastic supply. So, for example, when we're mining gold, if the price of gold went to $5,000 an ounce tomorrow, what you'd have is all of these miners would start pouring money into mining more gold. And as they mine more gold, it'll actually increase the supply of gold and it'll match the demand and the price will stabilize, right? So the price of gold can't like go to $1 million because the supply will always catch the demand.
Yep.
With Bitcoin, no amount of energy, no amount of work, no amount of anything can produce more than the amount that comes out every single block, which is 6.25 at the moment, which in 2024 will drop to 3.125 Bitcoin is issued every block. That is programmatically, it's less and less and less as more and more people want it. So you've got this position where Bitcoin is inelastic. So should governments or large institutions or anything like that inadvertently tell everyone that they're acquiring some Bitcoin, that's going to do catastrophic things for their ability to acquire as much as they can when they want to. Now, as we all know, you can't keep the cat in the bag forever. So yeah, at some point, something like that's going to leak. So the prudent strategy for every individual, and I would prefer individuals have the Bitcoin far more than I would prefer large institutions and governments to do so, is to just acquire as much as you can and just keep acquiring every single week, every single month. Just acquire some Bitcoin, put it aside, put it aside, put it aside, put it aside, because it's not an if, it's a when. And that's sort of what you want to position yourself for. So with you guys, I'd be putting Bitcoin on the balance sheet and thinking about how to leverage Bitcoin, really spending the time to understand what this thing is, the different layers, how the Lightning Network functions, how payment applications are going to function, how custody is a real big issue with Bitcoin. Is that I'll put it this way, like a bearer instrument is the most sovereign way to hold any form of wealth, right? Like when you hold it, it's yours. You are the property owner of it, but it is also the most dangerous and comes with the most responsibility because you're holding it and I'll come and take it from you, right? So if you think of the way you store your Bitcoin, like the public-private key cryptography that is used to basically encode the address that your Bitcoin is associated with, is mathematically unbreakable, right? And you'll have people talk about quantum computing, all this horse shit. I'm sorry, it's fucking false. It's not how you're going to break public-private key cryptography. So just for all the naysayers out there, but think about it this way. Let's use the gold analogy again. So your Bitcoin stash, let's say you got $5 trillion worth of Bitcoin, and let's think about it in gold. You store that gold in a vault that is absolutely impenetrable. No power in the universe can penetrate it. And you have the one key that can open that vault. And the key that opens that vault is, the one key. Now, instead of keeping that key secret, you just put the key on your bedside table. And then you go around, do podcasts and tell everyone that you've got this amount of, Bitcoin and the key, where the key is. What's going to happen? Someone will come take the fucking key and they'll take all your Bitcoin, right? So the key thing is, in the Bitcoin space, there's all these methods of storing your private key safely in a way that is impossible to touch. And once again, because Bitcoin is pure information, it is not a physical object, you can do really unique things with it. So I don't know if you guys have heard of this thing called a seed phrase.
Mm-hmm.
A seed phrase is a way to encode your private key in what's called a mnemonic. A mnemonic is just a set of words in a particular order, right? Now, these words, these 12 words or 24 words, you could store them however you want. You could tattoo them on your ass cheek if you think no one's ever going to see them. You could write them in an encrypted file and store them on a USB if you want. You could write them on a piece of paper and dig it up. That's probably not a good idea. I know Bitcoiners who etch it on fucking titanium and they hide that titanium somewhere so that it's stored forever. No one's ever going to touch it. I've even got a friend who, and this one is really unique, he's taken a photo of himself with something from each word, right? So like cat or beach or bus, there's a whole library of words. And he's got a collage of himself in his room on a picture frame. and he's got tens of millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin sitting there. No one will ever fucking know. I've got other people who write poems, and the first word in the poem is, their word, or the third word or whatever. So there's all these ways. And this when we think about like how to do something and subvert the government, one of the most important things you have to do is you have to think adversarially. You need to think about, what could my enemy do to shut me down early? Well, if you're trying to stockade all this gold and all these natural resources and physical stuff, it's very easy. They've got more guns than you. They'll come and take the shit. They'll throw you in jail. They'll say that you're a domestic terrorist and you're fucked. But if you've memorized it, or if you've got it on a piece of paper or something like that, they can't do shit. They literally can't, they can't take it from you. And the thing that's protecting you is two things. One is mathematics, so you don't have to worry about that piece. Number two is your creativity in concealing the access to your vault. That changes the game. So there's a book called The Sovereign Individual, which was written by Davidson and Rees-Mogg in the 1990s. And they basically predicted everything that's happening today. They predicted the fucking pandemic, all of it. And they talk about in there what's called the returns to violence. The book is called Sovereign Individual. I think someone just popped it in the chat. They talk about this concept of returns to violence, and that is the kind of the core thing that changes civilization long term. Is there's been periods in history where defense was easier than attack, and that's generally created periods of peace. And then there's been periods where attack, offensive technology was easier, and that's created periods of turmoil and war. We are the times are swinging back to defensive with respect to Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is the most defensive form of money that's ever existed, and it doesn't fund the state. So by going into Bitcoin, number one, you are maximally defended, and you are also simultaneously not feeding them, which they fucking hate.
They
Alek,
do.
I'm just going to interrupt, guys, and ask a question from our audience. There's a large amount of lost Bitcoin out there. How does this affect the future price that we're talking about?
It's good for us. Like, I actually think most of the Bitcoin long term is going to be lost. And it's not the Bitcoin's lost. The Bitcoin's still sitting there on the network. There's always going to be 21 million Bitcoin. That's not the case. What's lost is the key. So remember, I was discussing the key with you guys before. So you've got this vault, you've got this special key. So what happens when people lose their Bitcoin is that they lost their magic key. So let's say they had that key saved on a hard drive or something like that, and they didn't think it was, and they threw away the hard drive. It's lost because no amount of computing power in the universe is going to get that key back. You just can't get it back. Like the amount of, I think, don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure this is accurate, is that the amount of public-private key combinations that there exists, mathematically speaking, because it's 2 to the power of 256, I believe, is more than there are atoms that we know of in the universe. Like that's how big these fucking numbers that we're working on. So it's like, it's not like finding a needle in a haystack. It's fucking finding a fart in the universe. Like you're not going to find a private key. That's how secure something like Bitcoin is. So yes, there's been loads of Bitcoin lost. I think more and more is going to be lost. But all that does is create a stricter supply of the amount of Bitcoin, which is good for those of us who still hold our Bitcoin, because as the supply, is limited, the purchasing power of each amount of Bitcoin continues to increase. So there's absolutely no problem with that. It's a good thing in the end.
I want to take you back. Sorry, Kent, just one
Sorry,
last
go
question.
ahead. No,
I want to take you back to what you said about the government's buying up the Bitcoin secretly and not wanting the public to know. One of the questions from the audience is that if that was so true, then the price would have gone up of Bitcoin, and yet we see continually the price going down of Bitcoin. So what have you got to comment on that? And why is the price of Bitcoin continually going down? Because it was quite high there at one stage.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about magnification. Like, so we've got this thing that's gone from 0 to 20,000 in the space of 10 years against all odds, in an environment where the government hates it, the greenies hate it, the fucking eco-terrorists hate it, the liberals hate it, the conservatives hate it, everyone fucking hates it. And it still seems to be going. Like the Chinese tried to kill it last year. If you remember, they shut down all mining in China. And what did they do? They caused a momentary blip in the hash rate. And the hash rate now is double what it was before the China ban. They tried everything. They couldn't fucking do anything to this thing. So yeah, the price is lower. I would agree. I would argue that the price is low for a couple of reasons. First, let's understand what price means. Price is the midpoint between all interested buyers and all disinterested sellers of any good or service. That applies to milk, it applies to Bitcoin, it applies to property, it applies to anything. There's a midpoint, that's the price. The greater the liquidity, the greater the amount of buyers and sellers in a market, create a more liquid market and create a more defined midpoint. So start with, one end, like where there's not a lot of liquidity is like, for example, when you're selling your house, you have an offer at say $1 million, someone comes in and offers you 800,000, then you come down to 900, and someone offers, 850. So you end up finding the midpoint. The midpoint is the sale price. So the market perception is what the value of a good or service is. The function where Bitcoin's price is today is exactly where it should be based on the global understanding of what Bitcoin is. I mean, we've just done a little masterclass here on what money is and why Bitcoin's important. How many people are listening to this? And when you think about more broadly and more globally speaking, how many people even understand money? How many lemmings are out there still wearing fucking masks and taking, injections that are even going to be asking these questions, let alone understand Bitcoin, let alone understand the difference between Bitcoin and shitcoin, let alone understand understand it to the depth that it requires to not get scared when people who've bought into something sell it when they don't understand it, right? So Bitcoin grows in waves, and those waves are not because of Bitcoin, are because of human psychology. All markets grow in waves. Nothing goes in a one direction. That's just how it works. So we are 13 years into a evolution of money that will probably take another 100, 200 years. Like the Bitcoin like the subsidy section of Bitcoin, like the 21 millionth Bitcoin will not be mined until the year 2140. We got time, man. It's going to keep going. And then beyond that, like it's not going anywhere. So what I tell people is like, zoom out a little bit. Sure. We're in there now. And yes, there is a lot of, what I'd say, market manipulation going on. So what happens is these large institutions that want to have Bitcoin on the balance sheet or that don't like Bitcoin, all that sort of stuff, what they'll do is they'll short sell Bitcoin. And for people who don't know what short selling is that you acquire, you sell the good that you don't have yet. So you put downward selling pressure on a price and then you buy it back later and you make money. So what happens with any product and service, if there's more sellers than there is buyers, the price of the product goes down. It's fucking simple, supply demand 101. So what the large institutions and the people that don't like Bitcoin do is that they short sell the fuck out of it. But in order to short sell effectively, you need to be able to buy that Bitcoin back later. So you need to actually borrow it to sell it, and then you need to buy it back. Bitcoin's got a limited supply. If you look at the charts, all of the Bitcoin is slowly coming off the exchanges, and it's coming into cold storage wallets that is held by fucking psychopaths like me who will die with their private key. God isn't fucking touching my Bitcoin. Nobody. So what happens is it's coming off. So the amount of Bitcoin that is available for these short sellers to continue doing this shit is diminishing. This is like holding a beach ball underwater. This is the biggest motherfucking beach ball that's ever existed. And this pops out when they run out of steam, it's going to go to the next level, and then it'll stabilize there. We'll have another correction. We'll stabilize over a period of time. It'll do the next thing, and it'll keep growing in those waves. So anyway, like he's the person who asked that question is right in the sense that yes, the price is down at the moment, but this is all natural human psychology and artificial suppression. It's always going to exist. What you want is to just continue acquiring for yourself. You just want to be on the right side. And if you don't want to do it, you don't have to. Like, by all means, keep buying Australian dollars. See how good that goes.
We've got about 5 minutes left, Alek. So I want to give you the opportunity to tell us a little bit about your book, The Communist Manifesto.
Sure. And yeah. Guys, I just want to apologize. I ranted way too long. Yeah, the uncommunist.
The uncommunist manifesto.
Oh, the uncommunist. Sorry, my apologies. I've written it.
All good. So yeah, really quickly was this Mark Moss and I, and you guys have Mark Moss on the show. Actually, I'll get that intro done for you. But Mark and I met a little while, probably 2 years ago, actually, and he and I just kind of had this conversation about, we were actually in El Salvador before legal tender kind of came into effect over there. And we're having lunch and he's like, man, he goes, have you read the Communist Manifesto? I was like, why the fuck would I do that? And he's like, it's the dumbest book I've ever read. And he's like, but it's short and it's so widely read. And we found a stat somewhere that it's one of the most widely read political and economic treatises in history, which, I mean, tells you a lot about how stupid the world is. But we kind of talked about it. We said half joking, like, we should write a book kind of similar in length just to rebut it. So it was kind of an idea back in 2021. And yeah, 2022 came about. We got together, we did a book sprint, and we basically took everything that we've sort of learnt over the years with respect to free markets, Austrian economics, libertarianism, communism, all this sort of stuff, Bitcoin, etc. And we decided to write like a short book. It's only 85 pages. You read it in 90 minutes. And basically lay out a case. Like, we started off by rebutting the Communist Manifesto, but instead what we did was we changed the axis of a couple of the arguments. Number one is Marx argues that all of human history can be boiled down to the struggle between oppressor and oppressed. It's a fucking ridiculous argument, because then who gets defined who's the oppressor and who's the oppressed, right? Like, the propertied people are the oppressors. So if I'm born to a father who owns a shoe shop, am I automatically the oppressor so that I should have my shit stolen? Like, it's such a ridiculous ideology. So we say that the struggle is actually the choice between coercion or cooperation. That's been the universal struggle throughout human civilization, is, do I acquire wealth by beating someone over the head for it, or do I do something and we trade? One is multiplicative, which is the trading. The other one is subtractive, by beating someone over the head. That's the real struggle. So we kind of changed that axis. And then we also redefined capitalism, not as a political modality, but as a natural organic process. And one of the arguments we make in there is that capital is time, energy, money. That's like time, energy, natural resources. That's like layer one capital. And so secondary capital is things like, reputation, ideas, and things like that. But capital is the stuff that we have. Capitalism is the effective and efficient use of the stuff that we have. So capitalism isn't fucking political. We've been doing capitalism since the day we threw a rock at an animal to increase the efficiency with which we could get food, and the other guy made a fire and we had division of labor. So capitalism will always be there. It's politics that suffocates capitalism. So what we want to do as individuals, and when we're thinking about how to organize society and civilization, is we want to give space to capitalism, and we want to have rules and laws that protect private property. That's as simple as it is. And then everything in between, the market kind of solves. So we kind of wrote the book to give people that access and the definition of capitalism, so that they could think better about like how a more functional world should operate. So anyway, that's there now. We did an interview with Alex Jones actually 2 weeks ago, which was hilarious. So we're trying to get this book out there. We want to get, with Jordan Peterson and, all these other guys to kind of, I hope that this book will, I think we captured the zeitgeist of the time. And I think the zeitgeist of the time is a pushback on communism. And that's why we're all here today.
Cool.
Exactly.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Absolutely.
if you're listening and you're following the chat box, please, there's a link to Alex's book, The Uncommunist Manifesto. The book is out, book is live and it's out now. So go grab your copy. We will put the link up when we put the replay up as well. Give Alex a little bit of a plug there. So that's very cool. And of course, there's some other links in there that you can follow Alex with, follow his podcast. He's got podcasts and all sorts of things there. So do follow Alex and have a look around. Guys, is there any last questions before we close off?
I'd just like to say I'd love to get you back another time, Alex, at an appropriate time for you.
Sure.
A lot of people are saying this. They're saying this interview is just too short, and they want to learn more from you, mate. So thanks.
For sure. Me and Pete Evans and I ended up doing bloody 15 episodes. So be careful what you wish for.
Oh, we'll make it happen. Don't you worry.
Yeah, look, Cassandra's put that link up. So there's that availability to go and look at those interviews that Pete's done. And that's good. Alex, it has been an absolute pleasure, mate, having you on board. I love everything you're doing. And This is about how we expand people's minds and their way of thinking. It's a new way of thinking. It's a new era we're entering. So we need this sort of information, and I love it. Thank you very much.
Excellent.
Thanks.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for your bravery. Thank you for everything you're all doing. And I really appreciate having me on.
Excellent. Thanks,
Awesome.
Alex. We really appreciate you. Kent, Lance, thank you for being here with me. And to everyone who's listening, thank you for joining us on another episode of Triple Tap. We will see you the same time, same place next week. Bye for now.
Good night, everyone.